Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete, and welcome everyone to 2026. This is one of the episodes people most look for.
Yeah, it's our annual Where to Focus for HR and Payroll, and there's a lot to focus on. Absolutely, sure for that. But we will, we're going to break down what we think are the key highlights there. But it's crazy. 2026, man, it sounds like the future. It is the future, and here we are, and lots of things that I think are on our plate that is exciting, a little scary, but all things that we can learn from and improve from. So I'm excited for it. Julie, before we get started, we just had a big announcement. I just want to say thank you again to Zoho, OneSource Virtual, and GP for stepping forward and powering the show ad-free into 2026. We thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's been with us from the start and maybe just joined us or just joining in for the first time. We really, really appreciate you. And as always, we ask you the best thing you could do to help us out. Give us a subscribe, give us a like, share, whatever you can do to engage, comment. We've had some great comments. Tell us where you're from, tell us what you like, tell us what you hate. Any of that is good feedback, and we will take it and we will absolutely act on it. So excited to have you here. And here we go with our annual episode where HR and payroll leaders ought to focus for the new year.
Right.
So, all right, Julie, you want to set any context or you want to just get right into this?
I think we'll get right into it. And I don't think people will be surprised to know that we're going to lead with AI, but we do have a couple of other things, in store for you for sure. But everybody's craving to talk about AI first and foremost. It seems this year it's probably on some of your goals and your strategies. Some mandates are coming out, I think more now than ever. And so let's go ahead and just start there. And then we'll dig into some other things as we go along.
Might as well get the elephant in the room identified, right? Let's go ahead and talk about it because it's not going away. I went to dinner the other night with a few friends. One of my friends, he's an attorney, works for a small law firm. And we had this long talk about, what that's going to be like, what they're doing. And I thought it was really fascinating, as I talked to different businesses. So I thought that it would be a really good idea to talk about I'd like to call it maybe an AI boot camp, maybe an AI fit camp, whatever you want to call it. We all got to get in shape for this. And that's a lot of things. It's a lot of things. But I thought what I would do, Julie, is just give my point of view from kind of 5 strategic things I think you got to do, 5 tactical things I think you got to do. And I know we're going to drill down on some of that tactical stuff. And also just kind of give you a little contrast where I think it might look for a small company versus a big one, if that's all right.
That's all right.
Look, and listen, is this a complete list? I doubt it. There is a lot that you have to do. I think you have to take this in context with your transformation, your digital maturity as an organization, and your maturity at all as an organization. I think you have to take it into context with the sector you're in and the whatever your strategic slant is. I think you've got to cover all of that. So, okay, all right, let's get this started.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, I'm going to start with the tactical steps that I think you've got to do. I think the first thing you've got to do, we talked about this before, we're going to talk about it again later, clean, connected, and sharp data, right? You've got to have standardized data, standardized, normalized information. You've got to eliminate duplicate records. You've got to have documented data ownership and governance. And I think you've got to really get that in order. And we've been saying that for a while now. So if it's not there, it's really the foundational element of all of this. I think you've got to document processes and you've got to audit your workflows, right? You've got to know what are your AI ready use cases, right? What are you even going to go solve for? Again, we've talked about this many times. It's not like you're going to get this wad of cash that says, hey, go do AI. You're likely going to have to pick off key use cases, and you should, very intentional, very painful, costly, time and resource sucking use cases first. But how do you know what those are until you've really gotten your measurements in order, understood that what your processes are? And again, you're going to have to teach AI what to do. So those processes are going to become very, very, very important. And I would even take that a step further and say a kind of little sub bullet of that is you got to be kicking the tires on BCP right now, business continuity and data recovery, because you could very well, all this experimentation and all this preparation, and once we get live, with more AI at scale, I think you could have issues that might cause problems where you need to be able to recover systems and do things. So never a bad time to be focused on that part of it. I think the third thing that you really have to do is you've got to get your leadership upskilled around AI. You've got to build an AI literacy in your teams, right? And that's going to be leadership. That's going to be the people on the ground using it. But it's going to take a full court effort. And I think that's where all of the skilling around this is going to come is getting that AI literacy and that skill set around being able to use it effectively. And then lastly, well, not lastly, I guess fourth would be, if I'm counting right, is you got to embed AI into your existing systems. You can't just bolt it on. And I was poking around on this idea, or sorry, this term the other day, Julie, that I saw called shadow AI, right? Kind of like shadow IT. I've even heard about people letting people bring their own AI to work, which I think is insane. But having people doing things sort of in silos with technology does not make, it's not going to scale. It's not going to get the results that you want. And I think we actually talked about this on the show once before, that you're going to have to make sure that you are using solutions that are fundamentally embedded in your technologies, right? In your workflows versus, using these one-off things individually, right?
Yeah.
Silos. I
Yeah.
think that's dangerous, and which is a lot of what's going on. And I think a lot of what you're seeing in the results of many of these studies that they're not getting value is because they're kind of doing it very disorganized,
Right.
decentralized, if you will. And then lastly, I think the fifth thing is you've got to really measure AI impacts in the same way you would business transformation. And you've got to be measuring the outcomes, not just pedestrian sort of how many checks do we produce, whatever. You got to be looking at cycle time reduction. You got to be looking at error reduction, error prevention, decision quality, trust and sentiment. All of that stuff I think is going to be very, very important. And it aligns really well with my ROI scorecard I did for payroll in the PPCI that kind of starts to look at some of these other outcome-based impacts to ROI versus kind of pedestrian sort of metrics of where the car is, how the car is running, so to speak. So those are my 5 tactical. Any thoughts there, Julie?
Yeah, my first thought is, on the practitioner side of the house, is like tactical. Those are tactical. Every one of those is a
It's a
whole
lot.
thing to have to
Yeah,
get to, and they're not always as tactical. I mean, every one of those are things that people struggle and strive to get to,
yeah.
or on various places. So if that's the tactical, let's buckle up, right, for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
strategic.
I mean, look, I've been saying this. It's early with AI, but it's getting late too. Like if you're behind, you're falling faster and faster behind. And I think you're right. There's a lot of work to do here, and we're probably barely scratching the surface on all the things that have to be done. And again, that's going to depend on your maturity and where you already are as an organization. And if you've not really done the work so far to get your transformation going, man, you're starting from nothing. You've got a lot of work to do. So
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
agree.
Well,
Absolutely agree.
I know one of the things that I'm taking on this year, because I work with the practitioners who hear these things and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, it's overwhelming even to think about the tactical." Is in Q1, I'm taking on 15 organizations that want to do a quick 6 week,
Mm,
you know, quick hit to just get their arms around where to go, how to head, and how to get started. Really, how to
yeah.
get to your first vision of a use case.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's an idea still, but I'm going to pull it together pretty quickly. And the whole point is, yeah, you got to get started somewhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And we
even
got to
that
get.
list of 5 is a big list.
Yeah, and I still haven't even hit the strategic part of it, right? We
That's
got to hit
right.
those. But here's the thing, you're right. I mean, we got to get past ideation and experimentation and get to execution. I don't know if you've seen it, Julie, but Kyle Lagunas, one of my peers, he's got a great AI report, and that's one of the key things in there is HR's got to move past talking about it and start doing it. And there's a lot that's got to go into that. But
Yeah. And by the
yeah,
same token, I've had a number of folks say, oh, well, AI was 2025. So now what's new in 2026? And it's like, no, I
yeah,
don't think you
it's
understand.
not going away.
Like this is going to take a while to mature and it'll be here for a while on the list of hot things. So,
Yeah, yeah.
okay,
So great segue to the strategic part because the first one here is I think everyone's got to get on the same understanding that this is not another tech upgrade. This is a reset and a reimagination of your operating model. And I think the strategic element of that is you got to be very specific and you've got to articulate very well what AI is going to improve and more importantly deliver. And you've got to focus on those most essential, painful, resource draining use cases above all else first, right? Because I think if you just again try to kind of start doing this broadly with no real roadmap, no real vision, no real outcome based idea of what you're trying to achieve, I think you're just going to get lost. So again, this is not just another tech for you to buy. This is an absolute opportunity for you to rethink the way you do things up and down the organization. So big mindset shift there. Back to HR and data, I think you've got to reposition HR. I kind of talk about this in my payroll research. We've got to reposition payroll and HR as data decision engines, not just transactional processes, right? We've got to look at this as enterprise grade decision infrastructure that is fundamentally working off of skills data and job architecture and pay and time and attendance data and workforce management data and all of that working together to really be a fabric to the organization's decision making. So yeah, you got to start looking at this stuff very, very differently. Julie, I think you've got to get on your AI governance. Now, it's probably going to be a little bit more pressing for the bigger enterprise organizations, but you've got to come up with, I think, a trust model, a trust framework, because the biggest risk to AI, as we all know, or the biggest risk to it not making an impact is probably going to be people not trusting it, people not giving, not giving into it, but giving the opportunity for it to actually maximize and augment you, right? And fighting it.
Right.
And I hear a lot of people fighting it, right? Go back to my lawyer friend. I heard a lot of fighting it in that
There are a
organization. And
lot
I
of
was like,
companies. There are edicts coming out,
ugh,
just no AI. Don't use AI until they feel like that. They have to do that until they
yeah,
can sort out the rules of the road, right?
I understand, but
Yeah.
I think you got to be thinking differently now. And I think that if you're not, your competition is, you're going to get passed up. And I think that's going to be a key threat to most every business, big and small. All right, last two I got on here from a strategic perspective. I think this is pretty obvious. Everybody should already be doing this. You got to start redesigning your roles for AI augmentation, right? You got to eliminate tasks, and you've got to get HR to evolve, right? You got to start moving them towards that augmented data driven organization, and we should have always been doing that anyway. And then lastly, I think you've got to align your strategy around, with HR strategy, got to get in alignment with payroll, finance, IT, and the other business stakeholders, right? You can't go and do these things. You shouldn't be doing this in a silo. And that goes back to employees using solutions by themselves, in a very siloed way and not using it at an enterprise level. And I think the more that you can have this group consensus and this group effort, you're absolutely going to get much different outcome, much different buy-in, much different action, from everyone versus if you're all trying to go off and do things by yourselves in silos, right? I think you got to come together now more than ever. Your relationships and working together is going to be really, really key. And there's a lot of debates about whether HR and IT ought to really just get together entirely. If that'll bring them closer together, the jury's still out. But I do think that this is, what's the saying? It takes a village, right? It takes all of us. We got to all come together and work on this.
I
It's
think
not going to be a one person thing.
the challenge with that, I think, is much like payroll, the lens is different from different stakeholder groups, right?
Yeah,
And so it's not just a matter of getting a cluster of folks together who are probably going to be like-minded about things. When you do this, you actually have stakeholders with very different lenses, very
yeah.
different priorities, and there's goodness involved when you can actually sort through that and start to align with your peers who are looking at it through a different lens, frankly.
100%, 100%. Right? Payroll's bringing the compliance lens, finance is bringing that control lens, IT architecture, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's 100%. It's a team effort for sure. For sure. So, Julie, I want to hear your thoughts on this. I kind of started to think through this about like, well, what if I'm in a big company and what if I'm in a little company, right? Small company
Yeah,
versus enterprise. How does this differ, right?
yeah.
I think I said some of this along the way, but I think your enterprises are going to have to put a lot more emphasis on your data governance, your integration. I think they're going to have a lot more of the ethics policies and risk councils. I think you're probably going to have maybe AI pilots around segments of the business, segments of the company, right? Versus necessarily going all in all at once. Maybe there's a experimentation that needs to happen. And then I think too, you probably have to look at, I don't know that it's any different in a big company, but maybe there's sometimes a little bit more layers of people who have to decide things. So I almost think like full automation is probably going to be more like augmentation because you're going to have some decision making along the way, right? The human in the loop, the expert in the loop. I think that might be a little bit more bureaucratic in a bigger company. I don't know,
Oh, for sure. For
just my
sure.
gut.
Yeah, I think there's just
Yeah.
a lot more voices, and a lot more concerns about who controls or who owns it and where does
Yep.
it go in the bigger organizations. So governance can be a showstopper, right? If you don't have the right environment and the right culture to keep some things moving, and that defies or is different than where folks really want to get started, which is start small and do
Yeah.
something that drives efficiencies. And it's not going to be this big strategic thing probably from the get go. You're going to cut your bones on something that I can make tangibly better. And that's my favorite thing as
Yeah.
an advisor is I want to find something actionable. I don't want to spend a year of planning and governance and da 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 to actually show some results. And
Yeah.
and that's HR's conundrum always, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
agreed, agreed. Now, for the small businesses, I think that maybe it's somewhat similar, but maybe on a smaller scale. But I think that focusing is what I would say to the SMBs. Right, you're not going to be able to do everything at this enterprise breadth and speed. Right, you might have limited resources. So again, go back to those 2 to 3 needle moving, high impact use cases that you can tackle and show real ROI right away, I think is going to be the best case scenario for a smaller firm, right? Where you don't necessarily have all the resources in the world. I think you're going to have to, as a small business, probably leverage your embedded. We talked about this on the show, right? The AI that's coming with your commercial HCM, your commercial whatever. Less likely that you're going to be building custom AI models and things like
Right.
that. I just don't know that that's going to happen in small businesses.
I was
Yeah.
just going to say the same thing. And embedded, starting with things that are embedded in some of your key tools
Yeah.
and tool sets and systems is, the path of least resistance at times. You have it, you bought it, you own it.
Yeah.
It's got an isolated kind of an environment where your data is your data. So that feels like, maybe an easier path to hoe as far as getting
Well,
some traction.
yeah, and like we talked, I mean, I'm finding, and I wouldn't say it's this massive number, but I find there's a decent sample of organizations where that's how they're getting their AI. They're getting it from
Yeah.
their HCM investment or whatever. So, yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And then I also think that the smaller businesses typically still need to kind of really reduce their administrative load, right? I think you don't want to create more work out of this, right? It's not about making things more complicated and difficult. It's about making it easier and less burdensome to focus on your resources on more value added things, just like everyone should. But I think in a small business, that's going to be amplified probably even more because you often have limited resources in different departments. And then I think you've got to really, like I said, focus on the nuts and bolts, right? The accuracy of your payroll, the speed to hiring, the support that you can give your management and your frontline workers. All of that really is going to make the wheels turn really well versus maybe trying to go out and, like a bigger company, right? Kind of
Yeah.
focusing a little bit more is my advice.
What I love for the small mid-size, right, businesses as well, oftentimes you think, "Oh, I'm at such a disadvantage, I just don't have the scale." But what's really cool in working with the mid-size organizations down to the small organizations is you naturally have a lens that goes beyond any particular function because you just don't have, a dozen people in comp and payroll
Yeah.
and so you're really able, it's very natural and organic that these use cases come out that look more broadly across the hire to retire, span spectrum and figure out what would be most impactful. Whereas the big, large corporations, you tend to have team based, use cases, and so they focus
Yeah.
maybe more narrowly on the silo. So if you've ever felt like you're disadvantaged because you don't have the scale of the really large enterprises, don't
Yeah.
feel that way. You actually have a different lens and a different opportunity, and it can be more exciting and even more impactful because you're not siloed in your
Yeah.
functionally in your way of thinking.
Yeah, and you can see the end to end when you're kind of responsible
That's
for a
right.
lot of it, right? You got a couple
That's right.
things on your plate. It's not just one hat you're wearing a lot of times in the little businesses. So, yeah. So that's my advice on getting in shape for AI. I'm sure there's more to do. I'd love to your thoughts. If anybody out
Yeah.
there has some thoughts, throw them up in the comments. Tell me what you're doing, and we're going to bring more guests on. They're going to help us learn what's actually working, what's not, and give you some insights. So stick and
That's
stay with
right.
us on that topic. But yeah, all right, Julie, what do you got?
Okay,
Next
so
one.
I'm gonna start out also on the AI vein, right?
Yep.
But as you know, I get very involved in the nuts and bolts of contracting,
Mm,
deploying, choosing and selecting the systems and the technologies and the AI tools and the tool belt. And so, one thing that I thought I would share is a little bit more from that angle, the actually acquiring and getting the AI in place. We've talked a lot on this show about the fact that AI is using AI embedded in your key HCM suite or
yep.
your key strategic softwares is a really great way to go. And so when I think about how that's procured or how that comes out in the relationship with the provider, the AI has been pretty much embedded, not a separate module to buy, right? And
Yeah.
that applies pretty universally across the leading HCM solutions for sure, and even within ServiceNow and some of the workforce management products. But I wanted to explore a little bit further some of the pricing mechanism of that because
Yeah.
I see some things changing in contracting where AI is being called out as different modules or different services. And so I wanted to give a little bit of a prediction and some heads up around how I see that maybe evolving, and make sure that the community is thinking about this and recognizing when and if it changes. My prediction might be a little unpopular. I actually believe that the providers are going to ultimately, seek some explicit revenue streams for AI versus just the fact that they're supposed to be embedding and bringing innovation to their software solutions as your strategic partner. So that to me is a little bit cringe. I'd rather not see that. I'd rather, believe that that's what we're paying for as we buy into these strategic platforms. But I thought it would be worthwhile to, mention a few. For example, SAP SuccessFactors has base AI embedded, like everybody
Yep.
does. But there's also a premium AI that's powered by Joule, and so some extra things for goal generation or skills extraction, require purchasing some AI units on top of,
Yep.
the basic module, right? So it's creeping in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Workday's doing the same thing. Workday Illuminate is describing a consumption-based model where you
Yep.
have these annual allocation of flex credits that are included. So you get those, they're baked in, but it sets the stage for what happens if I exceed whatever those allotted credits are and, need to purchase more. How do I even know what I need? Do I need to negotiate what I get as far as the credits that are included are in the first case, and what
Yeah.
kind of tracking is there for me to know how that's evolving. And so it's coming. I'm just telling folks it's coming. There's
Agreed. Agreed.
definitely going to be some commercialization of these things.
Oh, absolutely. And look, we've talked about this a little bit. I've talked about it. This is evolving. Vendors are still trying to figure this out. It's a little bit of a SaaS sort of licensing kind of mix, and upgrading and flex credits. There's a lot of different models out there. And look, as I'm on the trail this year at all the events, I'm going to be pressing on that myself, and I'll bring it back, and we'll give some updates on that. And I'm sure you'll be seeing it on the contract side.
Absolutely. On the contract
Yeah.
side, sure. And I do think, do you remember, people, as we were shifted from the on-prem to the SaaS
Mhm.
model, a big part of what was the thing folks talked most about? They talked most about you're leveling out your expense, right? Your
Yes.
expense curve. So, that in that respect, it's, kind of a pay for it as you go, right?
Yeah.
Was the whole appeal to moving to SaaS. And as the providers mature in this space, and SaaS is kind of the way to go, I'm seeing more and more of the providers calling out or saying our subscription model is a subscription model and it's not consumption based. And so they're
Yeah.
trying to put a lot more limitations around, the users or the user counts, and, not going below certain thresholds, or being very restrictive around when you go above, paying additional in a way that is maybe not it's not the same as the old days of
Yeah.
bands. I have a band of employees, 500 to 1,000, and after that, I go to a
Yeah.
different price
Can
point.
I pause you to ask you something? I'm forgetting from my sourcing advisory and solution architect days, but what wasn't SaaS, if I recall correctly, what didn't that shift on the balance sheet the cost of the system from OpEx to CapEx?
Mostly
Or
because of the idea that the
yeah,
upgrades, you no longer had these big every year, every
right.
2 year, multi-million-dollar upgrades, right? And
Yeah.
so that's exactly what it does. And early days, you
Do
would
we lose
see,
that though? Do we lose that with
well,
AI? I don't
I
know.
I don't know if we lose it because of HI, but we definitely lose it as the subscription model evolves,
Changes.
is what
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
seeing. And AI is a big part of that as they start to articulate SKUs that are AI. So at what point in time do you, as a buyer, expect that innovation and that newly or additionally embedded AI versus the risk that they just call it a different SKU and now expect you to pay
Yeah.
for it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be a big topic
It
in the
is.
next couple of years. So if you're
It
doing
is.
renewals, if you're negotiating the first time around, there's some things to be aware of there. And, I get very involved in them. I'm always happy to be a resource to folks who are doing that. But I think I wanted to call out that kind of commercial aspect of AI because it is really important
Yeah.
for controlling your costs and having things really be a kind of pay as you go
Julie,
sort of
I
model.
completely agree with all of that. One thing I don't know if I mentioned this on the show about over a year ago, maybe it's been 2 years now. I remember being at a conference and there was this presentation being given by a vendor, I think it was, and they were talking about how you ought to go out to your vendors and just demand your price go down because AI is making things cheaper. And I never raise my hand and contradict a presenter no matter what they say, but I raised my hand and said, I don't think that that's what you should be telling people. I don't see that anywhere. Do you see that happening anywhere where people are like, oh, my price is going down because now I have AI or the vendor has
No,
AI?
I see and hear that talked about all the time. There is
I
kind of
think
a
it's a
loose
myth.
buyer expectation. But what I will tell you is, you equate some of that to your Workday calls it innovation index, like your annual increases, right?
Yeah.
And I think it applies even more to services than it does to the technology buy, truly.
Exactly. That's exactly what they were
Um,
talking about was
yeah.
service, managed service. I was like, I don't
And
know.
yeah, so there you capture some of that, but those are the types of arguments that commercially you end up having around, well, why should I have an annual COLA inflation? Shouldn't you be keeping pace with the reduction of cost or the
Yeah.
streamlining and efficiency in your services? So it does end up becoming something that the rubber hits the road in the
Yeah.
contracting and commercialization of your relationship with them.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't see them. I haven't seen a vendor saying, hey, we're lowering our prices. They're definitely raising their margins, but I don't see
Yeah.
anyone saying, hey, our prices are going to go down now because we have AI in the back office. I
No,
haven't seen
no.
it.
But
Yeah.
shouldn't we hope that they stay pretty consistent, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you expect to have that innovation baked in and to be the providers and the clients alike should have more opportunity to level out their costs or to increase and add scale because they're able to continuously drive efficiencies in through
Yeah.
the technology and everything else,
Yeah,
right?
and you gotta remember, listen, I've been saying this for like 10 years when we were still in a phase, I feel like when I became an analyst in those mid-teens where people thought outsourcing means cheaper. And I
Yeah.
kept telling people like, I don't think you understand that when you outsource payroll, for example, benefits, whatever, you're largely stepping into an innovation engine and cycle that you're not gonna proliferate, you didn't invest in,
Yeah.
but you need and you need to incrementally be a part of that. You got to understand what you're doing. You're upgrading. You're advancing. You're not just sort of your mess for less. If that's what you're going
Yeah.
for, that's
Yeah.
not transformative. That's not going to change you. That's only going to kick the can. So I think there's
Yeah.
just a lot of misconceptions.
Well, and listen, you should think about it. If you think about just your tactical five options
Hmm.
and then your strategic five options, providers don't have any less of a row to hoe
Yeah,
to put those things in effect. I mean, it's a big investment of time and effort for them to do the same thing that you would have to do by yourself. And they're trying to do it across multiple client bases. So,
yeah,
yes, you should expect it, but it's no easier for them than it is
right.
for you to get a payroll or an HR operating budget and say, hey, you have AI now, cut that by 15%.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Get rid of some
because you
heads.
should be able to do it, cheaper and better, right?
Yeah, misconception. I think for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So, okay, well,
All
I
right.
felt like that I knew we would both come up with some AI angle. So,
Yeah, had
there
to,
you
had
go.
to.
We'll lead with those. The third item that I had, you alluded to a couple of times in technical, and I just want to go back to it and call it out as a hot topic number 3. Data, data, and data.
Mm,
Every single guest on the show, we end up having some conversation around, well, what can I do now if I can't tackle this bigger issue? And you've mentioned it a couple of times already, just calling out the need to solidify, get clean, validate your data, understand what are your even sources. And that is no small chore, even for small organizations as well. But then what do you do? I mean, like, what are you trying? What's the objective even of messing with that data, right? I think we hear, or at least I hear, a couple of trendy messages depending on which software or solution the vendor is solving for. We
right.
have no small number of software providers or solution providers that are saying, put all your data in one place, right? Get away from best of breed point solutions, put it all into, again, the integrated HCM suite because AI will act across, a bigger environment of data. And that's absolutely true, right? There's absolutely benefit to
Hmm.
doing that. I would say, HR folks, listen up because now you've seen some episodes where they're saying, no, no, all your data, not just all your HR, hire to retire data, but all your HR, finance, IT, and supply chain data, right?
Yep.
And so the whole movement toward, the ERP suite. So, just recognize that pendulum, is swinging away from the point solution into the put it all together in one for several providers that are offering those sorts of services, right? Or that scope of technology. But there's another way that I hear this coming together, and that is the idea of focusing on data integrations that are easier and better and quicker and real time, right? The APIs and pre-built.
Yeah.
And, shouldn't all of this new technologies and the AI and the API, innovations lead us to say, why can't we just have a bunch of point solutions? It should be like this to actually put things together. Shouldn't be this huge effort anymore. And so we've had guests on our show as well that are hot in the middle of developing these systems or
Yeah.
tools that are specifically focused on integrations so that you don't have to worry about point solution data and you can bring things together and leverage the data broadly, which is really what people are definitely trying to do.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's a weak point. I mean, we saw that in the PPCI. It's still integrations, still a weak point for even firms that think they're modernized. There's a lot of opportunity. And you're right. Data's not going to flow if you don't have those things tightened up and squared away. So too many options
yeah.
out there to fix that. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'd say a few things like watch for some of the, even the leading platform providers to begin to lean in. Again, I think the market is kind of pushing them in this direction, but is it really the differentiator? The market is pushing them to lean into the technology and to build in and bring AI and innovation, right? But and so the managed services portion that you also might be looking for, especially in payroll or ben admin, right? You're
Hmm.
looking for that managed services. And so we see a lot more of the providers leaning into the technology, maybe at the cost of a little bit less services focus. And in fact, we've had a number of episodes where our guests have said, but the services is very differentiating and very important to them. So watch as your providers lean into AI and you're asking and pushing them to lean into AI for the right balance of managed services as well, or for changes or reductions in managed services, because they're going to presume that you just want to drive all of that activity through the technology engine that you're begging them,
Yeah.
to
That's a
stand up
great
and
point.
put in place.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Great point. Great point. Man, it's so this all sounds like a mountain to climb.
Yeah, it is all a mountain to climb. And to be quite honest, practitioners and HR payroll leaders, they have to figure out where do I focus because I
Yeah.
can't do everything all
Get
at once.
help.
So
Yeah.
so is it a tactical 1 through 5? Is it, a data thing? Like what exactly am I going to articulate for myself? And you know what, whatever it is, just make project
Just
progress and
start.
move
Yeah,
right
yeah,
in the right
yeah, and
direction.
get help. I kind of was joking there a little bit, but I'm not. I think again in all of my research, every time you ask about any elements of transformation and skill set in house to handle it and make it happen, they always say they need help. So
Yeah.
get help, right? There's plenty of help out there.
Yeah.
There's plenty of peers that probably have done some of this. Maybe you can begin to. We brought some of them on here. Have a conversation with them. Sit down, pick their brain, share. See what you can do. The community is very strong that way. So
So
yeah,
let's keep this moving, right? Let's go to, I think, our fourth item that I was
yeah,
wanting to call out today is the idea of the payroll delivery model. And honestly, this applies to the whole HR delivery model as well, but having more flavors than ever before, right?
yep,
So, and the providers, there's different providers, there's so many different ways to think about your payroll delivery. I'm in the camp of payroll as a part of HR. Because of the engagement and experience. I know for a number of other folks, it's more naturally a part of finance because of the risk and compliance. We've heard a lot of our guests talk about that. But there have been a lot more variations or flavors of payroll support or
mhm.
payroll vendors and services
Oh
than
yeah,
I think ever before. So you've got, processing only where you're just buying the software and trying to embed as much as possible. You have managed payroll, you have comprehensive payroll, you have these, the pay slips of the world and the folks that are doing, kind of aggregation or a middleware to connect your existing payrolls.
yeah.
And
Fintech, right? We
yeah,
got fintech out there.
fintech fitting in there and global payroll being a specialty niche, right? So pulling together the universe of your payroll model is really important. And when you think again about the services that you buy, I just find more and more clients that are, the contracts will say, you, the client, does everything but what I've listed here.
Yeah,
And it's impossible to be comprehensive about exactly what you expect the provider's doing and what they're not doing. And so there's a lot of missed expectation or
yep,
fumbles in that space. And then we're seeing organizationally a lot of companies start to figure out, what do I do with things that might fit in a niche place, like global payments, right? Like your
Mm,
fintechs,
yeah.
like tax and mobility, like workforce management, time and scheduling, which often in the past had been a very operational role. Like, how does that fit in?
Yeah.
And you mentioned, we had one episode where we talked about in the SMBs, the whole idea of embedded payroll solutions and
Yep.
Fiserv's Clover, right? I mean, there's just new and different things popping up all over the place. And so you can't just turn around and say, hey, five peers of mine, how are you doing payroll? Maybe I'll just emulate that.
Yeah.
And that's like the first inclination from folks, is to say, well, these three other guys are doing it this way. I guess I better
Yeah.
shop this too.
Agreed. Yeah, I like what you're saying there. By the way, shameless plug, I guess you could say, but I'm literally doing some research right now with ADP and Fiserv on Clover, and I've got to interview Fiserv. It's been
Oh,
really
that's
interesting.
awesome.
So look for that to come out. I've got some points of view on embedded, but you're absolutely right. Like, one of the things I think is so cool about payroll now, and I have this in one of my presentations about the fact that payroll's never been harder than ever. It's never been harder than it's ever been. But there's actually more ways of getting to the right answer, and there's no wrong answer as long as it's accurate, timely, compliant, all of that,
Yeah.
and it fits your operating model. But I would say that with all of this, right? There's so much modularity, integration capabilities, and options for solving your unique problems. And even if you can't find it, you can go into, say, the Workday ecosystem where you'll have like a KPMG or someone else building an app or something that's going to fill a gap very specifically. So the idea that you can't find a solution to your problem is really not a good excuse anymore. And the
Yeah.
idea that you can't necessarily that it's a one size fits all, those days are really gone. You could put together a really interesting model for yourself in a lot of different ways and solve for the same answer,
Yeah. Yeah.
every time. And there's no wrong answer to it,
And
I
I
think.
think my specific prediction here, at least for what I'll be seeing more in the next year, I'm already seeing it, is people that come and are looking for kind of gap fillers or
Yeah.
RFPs that are aimed at, hey, I use ADP or I use Dayforce, like any of the big guys, UKG, you name it. How do I make that better? Do I move it internally and align tax with finance, for example, instead of have it in an HR payroll team? Do I application maintenance support, things like adding wage codes or earnings and deductions are often change orderable events. And so, do I upskill my team and figure out, how I can do more of that better? There are niche providers in the ecosystem that will
Yeah.
manage and do those things for you, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so there's just even knowing kind of the world of possibility is it takes a lot
Yeah.
to feel like, even for you and I, like, okay, I know who is this? What do they do? And what
Yeah.
what need do they fill in the marketplace, right?
Right.
So don't feel silly. Reach out and ask for help. And you might not necessarily have to take everything out to market. You might be looking to figure out, how do I fill a gap? How do I
Agreed.
make this more efficient?
Yeah, I like to call it white spaces, but yeah, you know what I would emphasize and finish that statement with, Julie, spot on advice. The
Yeah.
period I would put on that is get off the magic quadrants. Stop buying off the magic quadrants exclusively.
Yes.
Go broader than that, because there are a tremendous number of solutions that are not on those things that are not magical at all. I used to create them; they're not magical.
Yeah.
But there's so many more great vendors out there that are creating some amazing things. And the idea that you have to go with the three or four that
Right.
no, you don't have to do
Yeah.
that anymore. You can
And
search out, right? You can
And by
stretch
the way,
out.
if you knew how some of them get on those squares, grids, and quadrants, you'd be you'd
Well, it
be
should
yeah, it
be.
would make sense why some others aren't on there, right?
Yeah, maybe, but there's a lot that goes into it,
That's right.
and I mean, as a person who built them, we have to be very strict about how the
Yeah,
rules are and
that's
what we
right.
do, and try to protect objectivity and all of that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that. But my point is just there's more to it than what you
There
see
is.
on the quadrant and the big 10 firms. You got to go out and look at some of these emerging solutions, because they are making great impacts.
Yeah.
And there are going to be those big solutions very soon. And what better time than if they fit your need? Why
Yeah.
not, right? Give them a
Explore.
chance.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay,
So,
so I think you're gonna take us home, right? On
I've
number
got yeah,
5.
I've got one more, and it is a bit of a, I wouldn't say it's where to focus. It's a call to action maybe for how to shift the paradigm on some things, right? Like, and I'll give you an example of where I kinda came up with this. So, I spend a ton of time, like you do, in and around, benefits and wellness and payroll, obviously, HCM, and I keep seeing a common theme across benefits. And I'll give you a great example. I was at a client advisory board with Daily Pay. We were listening to all of these CHROs and compensation and total rewards type folks in the room, operations folks, just all kinds. And one of the common things that I heard just really summarizes what I think we've heard for probably several years now. Is that benefits and when we're talking benefits in America, right, we're largely probably insinuating medical benefits, but there are a lot of other things that are a benefit, right? Paid time off is a benefit. Obviously, earned wage access is a benefit, a 4-day work week. Any of those sort of flexibility enablers could be a benefit. So we're talking about this broadly, right? And what I would say is that the tone that I keep hearing is that there's a frustration on the part of organizations who are trying to do the best they can in the wellness sort of conundrum. We've talked about that before. There's financial, there's mental, there's all of that. We know it's impeding productivity. We know it's impeding people's engagement. There's a lot to this: health, wealth, retirement, all of that, right? But I think one of the problems is like there's this issue where employers are doing something, but that something is talking past the people who actually need it, and it's not getting used. So I want to give you an example, an actual data point here, Julie. I went to the BLS this morning, actually, before this podcast, and I can only see 24-hour data because I don't think they've done 25 yet, but they will, I'm sure, here in the spring. Do you know what percentage of U.S. workers have access to medical benefits? Do you know the number?
No, I don't know the number, but I would intuitively think it's 60 to 70%.
Okay.
I'm gonna risk being totally wrong and looking like an ass here.
No,
but
you're
I'd
really
love
close.
to know.
You're really close. 75% of U.S. workers have access to medical benefits. Okay. Do you know what proportion of them actually participate in those benefits and actually use them?
No, I bet it's lower. If you were to say how many understand them, I'd say it's bottom low, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. Participation, is it as much as half or is it less than half?
It is about 48% actually participate. So here you go, right? Like here we think as an employer, hey, we're offering benefits to most people, but here's a good example, Julie. I talked to a firm the other day. They do like loans. They give you access to loans, not just through your paycheck, but it's like a loan solution, fintech, whatever.
Yeah.
They actually have an employer. I'm not going to say the name of the companies on either side, the vendor or the company. They have an employer who utilizes their solution to give people authorization to loans to help them pay the copays and the copays and the what's the co-insurance, I guess it would be, so that they can use the benefits at all.
Yeah.
Right. Now this is a uniquely American problem, right? And we could go on and on into all of that. But the point is that what we're putting forth in terms of benefits is missing the mark. We're not meeting people where they are. We're not actually solving the real problems, apparently. And it is bigger than medical here in the U.S. and certainly maybe in other countries as well, because I think benefits in other countries takes on a little bit different meaning. But I guess what I'm saying is what I've come to the realization is that, and I would liken this to the paradigm shift that I offered to payroll. And that is, what if we stopped treating payroll like this constant cost takeout exercise and this hospice organization that we're gonna do our best to just keep it breathing and living, but we're not actually gonna do anything to make it perform, right? What if we shifted that mindset? And I talked about this in the Payroll Profession Confidence Index, and I gave you a way to measure this. But what if we made payroll an investment outlet, where we were investing and looking for actual material strategic outcomes for the business in the form of ROI, right? Okay. Well, I'm saying now, what if we took a paradigm shift to benefits, right? Because one of the things that I think I've seen, you probably have a lot of experience with this, is for a lot of organizations, benefits means medical. They don't think about anything beyond that, largely. And benefits is often a procurement exercise that is almost very similar to payroll, and it's cheap and cheerful, right? Let's just get it. Let's just do what we have to do, right? Kind of like car insurance or whatever, right? We got to do what we got to do. But are you thinking thoughtfully about the 5 generations in your workforce and the layers of complexity and maturity within each of those 5 generations and what they need and want to be able to create an experience that's good for them, that does give them wellness in every way possible, financial, mental health, everything? Or are we just fundamentally hammer looking for a nail? And so what I'm challenging people to say is like, well, just like payroll, instead of looking at payroll as a cost takeout exercise, look at it as an investment area. What if you looked at benefits not like a procurement exercise, not like a one size fits all, but you looked at it as a wellness portfolio that you managed in the same way that you should be managing, or your financial advisor should maybe be managing your retirement fund, right? Stocks, sectors change, things evolve. New investments become better than others. Your risk tolerance changes as you get older, or you need to, make certain life choices. What if we treated benefits that way? What if we plugged and played all of the layers of things that we could do to help employees pull those levers, right? Those flexibility levers and those benefit levers to help them create an environment that did fit them uniquely. It did fit their maturity. It did fit their moment. And it was affordable in a way that the employer was successful with it and the employee could be successful with it. So
Yeah.
not necessarily a where to focus. It's just hey, think about this as you're going out there and you're looking at your benefits programs. Look beyond just trying to get it cheap and cheerful and make sure everybody has something, and look more about what are the real challenges that your workers have and how do you shift that to something that's more value added for them. And I've got some examples if you want to talk those, but what do you think about that, Julie? Is that insane? Is that
No,
unachievable?
it's not insane. And as you know, a big part of Heron Palmer Advisory, which is where I work, is
Yeah.
benefits. It's got a top slot and noted for what's going on in benefits advisory. And, not only has navigation come in and been a thing, but the different voluntary benefits and the strategy of combining that with total rewards I've definitely seen
Yeah.
a marked move toward that sort of thinking. And I think what's been crazy about it is there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of thoughts about what do I do? How do I appeal to 5 different generations? And, maybe the easy way to have approached that is just to bring a smorgasbord of stuff, right? And try to offer as many different things as you can so that people can choose what they want, right?
Yeah.
That seems to be like the first line
You
of
got
trying to
to.
get to that.
I think
But
you just
I,
have
I
to.
think
Yeah.
as that evolves, we're going to see a lot more thinking and acting, and these are slow. These are boulders that take a while to roll and move
Oh yeah.
around at times, but to get to that point where you have some strategic point of view and a way to bring that appeal to everyone that includes financial wellness and all the different new and innovative things that people are thinking. So I think you're spot on there, and
Yeah.
it's been kind of evolving, but it's still surface level and a lot of experimentation, and it'll become table stakes, I
Yeah.
believe.
I think the workforce is going to force some of this. Dynamics are going to force some of
Mhm.
this, and look, you and I know this. I mean, I run into all kinds of cool rewards vendors and wellness vendors, just things that are just popping up all the time. There's a solution for everything. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't do it all, but you can. And again, we can go back to things like a 4-day work week, right? PTO type, unlimited
Flex time.
PTO and
Yeah.
flex time, and there's so many little ways you could. I wouldn't say it's free, but there are ways you can do things that are lower cost, and shift things and listen to your employees. Let me give you an example, Julie. When we were at that event, one of the employers was a restaurant, very famous restaurant place, chain or whatever. And they were saying, hey, we offer all of our employees free meals when they're on the clock, period, right? Dinner, lunch, whatever. But not all of our employees and not every employee wants to eat the same thing every day, right? When they're working. And they maybe want to have other choices. Maybe it's a dietary thing. Maybe it's a personal choice. So what they did was they said, hey, uh, we're going to shift this to, I think they shifted to a meal per diem payment so that people could go and maybe do their own thing. Now that has probably a tax impact versus a de minimis
Sure, sure.
impact. But the point is that that's listening. That's listening and shifting. And it probably didn't cost a lot to do that. And now you've really met an employee request, an employee need, and it is practical, and I think it is fair, right? It's not like, hey, they're asking for something insane. They're asking you to just be, kind of be thoughtful and let's mix up the menu a little bit, right? I mean, thank you for what you give us. And I thought that was, that's smart, right?
Yeah.
Listen to the people. I think they know they know what their challenges are. You can hear the answers from them in a lot of ways. And there's so many providers out there now that are offering solutions that are just fundamentally helping with these things,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
yeah, love
Hey,
it.
and listen, the HR leaders, like your biggest challenge in this whole entire space, I think, is then figuring out how to communicate that value
Yep.
through, we've forever had total reward statements or compensation statements and things. And that's not easy. There's a lot of things that come together to make that happen. But if you're gonna do it, you want to get credit for it. And you want to make
Yes.
sure that people know it, they understand it, and that they derive value or they appreciate the value that comes from that. I mean, that's the whole reason that you're doing some of the things you're doing and exploring these new avenues. It's exciting. It's a great time to be a leader.
It is. It is. There's so many ways to, like we said, like for payroll, we talked earlier and other things, there's so many ways to solve for the answer that you don't need to necessarily be stuck in one lane or paralyzed
Exactly.
in any way. So Yeah. All right. Well, is that it,
Okay.
Julie? Did we hit them all
I
5?
think that's a wrap. I took from somewhere, we both probably Google and keep an eye out on who else is sorting out what trends and so forth. But
Yeah.
I saw kind of a big four list of strategic imperatives, and I would say, like, I think we did a pretty good job of calling out things in all of those areas. The first
Yeah.
was obviously embed agentic AI and build trust in HRIT governance. Right, it came through very clear. There was some shift from roles to skills, mobility, and continuous learning, and I think that's embedded in some of the operating model bit. And holistic well-being and compliance and hybrid ecosystems. That's certainly where we ended. And a fifth one, and I don't know if this was an explicit one for us, but the fourth one that I captured as I was just kind of keeping an eye out for where folks were headed was modernize your culture, performance, and leadership for a change-rich environment. And we've
Yeah.
definitely had years where we focused a lot on agility and change management. It's almost you can't get shit done,
Yeah.
right? You can't
It's just
do
part of the
things
game now.
without that muscle memory. So
Yep.
if you don't have it yet, keep working on it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. All right. Look, let's head out of here, Julie. But I thought it'd be good. Why don't you tell everybody where we're going to be in San Antonio? Let's talk about that. I want to see if if anybody else is out there is going to be there. We'd
Yeah.
love to see you. But go ahead.
Yeah, so Pete and I travel. We try to cover everything everywhere as much as we can, but we're going to consciously do a few things together,
Yeah.
and we're going to bring the podcast to a few events that we know are really popular with practitioners. And the one that Pete's alluding to is the World at Work Total Rewards 2026 in San Antonio in mid-April.
Yeah.
And so we'll both be there, especially early on, because there's other things we have to do. But you'll start to see us there at
Yeah.
times, even as a podcast entity. And so if you're going to be there, we know we want to hear about it. We want to connect with you there. We'll be doing a little bit of episode work maybe while we're there too.
Yeah.
But that's a part of kind of taking this whole thing to the next level for us in 2026.
Yeah, yeah, no pun intended, but we're taking the show on the road, basically. We're going to bring the show to you. And yeah, we're already going to be at some of these events as analysts and as advisors. And so for me personally, I'm excited. I've not been to this one. This is more your world than probably my world. I'm stoked to go and get around some of these total rewards leaders and document some of that. And yeah, we're going to bring the HR and Payroll 2.0 flag there and bring back some good content. So if you're going to be at the event, shout us out. Let us know.
Yeah,
Let's
let
get
us know.
together. And and look for us at others. We're going to figure out some other events to be at.
Hey, and by the way,
Yeah.
for our OG listeners, right? Like, this isn't new. We did it at a Niamo event.
Oh, yeah.
Almost
First 3
the
or
first
4
year
episodes.
or
Yeah.
so that we were in the game, right? And so
Yep.
so we've actually got a little bit of experience doing some of this, but it does take a village, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
pull off something that's really high quality. So that'll be part of what we're fitting into 2026.
Yeah, yeah. Look for us there. We're going to try to figure out some other events. We're trying to work on maybe some events, more events in the U.S. for sure. Maybe some overseas. We're not sure yet. We're kicking the tires on a few, but yeah, you'll see us out there. So let's get together and let's let us know what you think. Come talk to us. Maybe you can jump on the show if you want. We'll
Yeah.
see. So
Yeah.
all right, Julie. Anything
No,
else?
like, more than anything, like, welcome to 2026. I feel
I
like
know.
this is a little later in the January than we're usually have our focus episode out.
Yep.
But it's going to be a wild ride of a year. So,
Yeah.
so here we go. Strap on your boots and let's get to it.
Yep. Welcome to the future. Yeah. And stay with us. Look, we're going to have a lot of great episodes coming. We have so many cool people lined up. I'm excited. We almost have too many. I think we're trying to figure out how to fit them all in. But yeah, stick and stay with us. We really appreciate you. And yeah, we'll be back very soon.